For my history project, we are going to be talking about some questions within the chapters. So, Woodrow Wilson's policy, morale, and imperialism, and how did he justify it? Woodrow Wilson's policy, morale, and imperialism was that the U.S. had the duty to promote capitalism and American values. How were immigrants treated during World War I, and how did anti-German sentiment become especially intense? During World War I, immigrants were treated terribly, especially German Americans, due to the issues going on politically. They were treated terribly, and they faced persecution, and this resulted in the spread of propaganda. Why did the eugenics movement emerge, and in what way did it shape American domestic and foreign policy? Eugenics was a program that Hitler had promoted, and it was created to create the ideal race. This would shape Americans' policy of racism and classism. Wilson's efforts to expand democracy were limited, in which groups were excluded. His plan to promote democracy was the 14 points, and he excluded many races such as Hispanics and African Americans. He was just overall a racist man because he was the first Southern president after the Civil War. How did Black Americans experience World War I, and what changes did they hope the war? How did Black Americans experience World War I, and what changes did they hope the war would bring for their status in the United States? Black Americans were segregated at this moment during World War I. However, for the war needed troops, so African Americans were joining. They would hope that it would, by demonstrating their patriotism, it would help them secure voting rights and equality. Why did the U.S. Senate ultimately refuse to ratify the Treaty of Versailles? The U.S. Senate would refuse to ratify the Treaty of Versailles because there were concerns about the U.S. being involved into more foreign conflicts after World War I. Did World War I actually make the world safe for democracy? Why or why not? And how did the war both strengthen or weaken democracy within the United States? World War I had actually strengthened the democracy by advancing women's suffrage and economic opportunities. However, it became the opposite end was the racial injustice that many immigrants had faced. To what extent did Wilson's act on his own political ideas, and how did he oppress minorities and colonize people interpret his ideologies? So, although Wilson was a progressive president, he created things like the Federal Reserve, helping with the progressive movement with money. However, he was, again, since he was one of the first Southern presidents after the Civil War, he was unable to help minorities, just breeding racism within the United States. What major themes and events defined American life in 1919? So 1919 was the start of economic incline and success. So this was the beginning of the Roaring 20s. It was, although it was a time of prosperity, it was defined with intense political tension transferring from the time of peace. So it created a lot of political tensions.